Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOonline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the world of martial arts. My guest today was born and raised in New Bedford, Massachusetts, been involved in martial arts for almost half a century and holds over 15 black belts, has been the owner-operator of 5 commercial studios, been inducted into 5 martial arts halls of fame, has one of the largest martial arts book, magazine, and video collections in the U.S. In his spare time, he enjoys singing karaoke, comic books, and video games. Please welcome my guest today, the man they call KENPOJOE, Mr. Joe Rebelo. How you doing today, sir?
How you doing, Brian? Thank you for inviting me to your program, and really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm excited to have. I know we've chatted many times in the past, and this is the first official time. So it's on record, so no holding back this time. So well, what we like to do with all my guests, I want to jump back to the very beginning. I like to find out, where did that initial spark come from? That first interest in martial arts, kind of what started your martial arts journey?
Well, I was 7 years old, and I was doing father-son horseplay with my dad, and he hit me with a karate chop and dropped me. And instead of crying, I looked up at him and said, "What was that?" And he goes, "That's karate." I'm like, "What's karate?" Well, my father had been studying at the time with a gentleman by the name of Dave Schuster, and actually his brother was actually a guitarist with my father's wife at the time for a Portuguese band. She was a famous singer. And his brother, Dave Schuster, had studied Kyokushin Karate, which was the system from Masayama.
Yep.
And if you look in the first edition of Masayama's book, This is Karate, and you look for Kyokushin schools that are listed, Dave Schuster at the House of Oyama on Dartmouth Street in New Bedford was the official representative for the Northeastern United States.
Okay.
But at that time, again, Kyokushin is a very rough and tumble system. So at the time, there was no children being taught. I don't even think they were even teaching women at that time at that location.
Wow.
Right. So my dad would give me little lessons here and there, little introductions into Kyokushin and whatnot. He also gave me 2 books. He gave me the classic Shotokan book, Karate, The Way of Empty Hand Fighting by Nishiyama and Brown. And he gave me another book by the famous Bruce Tegner.
Nice. Okay.
So we progress on to the early 1970s, and I was going to a parochial junior high school, St. Anthony's in New Bedford. And I had met with a friend and fellow student there, Eric Chevalier. And Eric was studying at one of the first 20 United Studios of Self-Defense in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. Now, United Studios was founded by Fred Villari. Fred Villari was a former student of Nick Serio. And at one point when Nick Serio moved down to Florida, he and another friend of his, Rudy Horn, who I believe was one of his students, got together and decided to open up 2 schools in Waltham and Dedham, respectively. Well, Nick Serio tired of from Florida, and came back to Rhode Island. And Fred Villari came, we've got these 2 studios and we want to make them Nick Serio. He's like, "What are you talking about?" So they had a major falling out, and Fred Villari decided to open his own chain of schools called United Studios of Self-Defense. So Eric would talk about his training in Kempo there, and that summer they had an advertisement in the local paper, 3 months of karate training, including a free uniform, free patch, and a free bag to hold it in. So like, my mother was a stitcher by trade, and I pointed this out to my mother for a whopping $99, and she agreed.
Wow.
So I went to train with Fred E. Hosmer, which most people knew as Ed Hosmer, and started training in Kenpo Karate. And in the old days, it was like front position, bow to the flag, bow to Professor Chow. And there, next to the American flag, was a picture of Professor William Kwai-Sun Chow. Now, years later, I would find that Xerox picture was actually autographed to Nick Serio instead of Fred Villari. Matter of fact, Professor Chow had no idea who Fred Villari was. But at the time, we were studying Kempo, and we were actually studying a system that originally was brought to New England by George Passari from Rhode Island. He in turn taught Nick Sirio, who was a auto mechanic in Boston at that time. And Nick Sirio in turn opened his martial arts studio and taught Fred Villari. So that was the lineage that we came from. We would do the classic 5 forms, which were part of the Kara Zempo Goshin Jitsu system from originally, his real name was Hilaron, but he never liked it because children can be cruel and they would make fun of him, say he was hilarious and different things. And he also had a speech impediment. I always reminded of the classic film with Marlon Brando on the waterfront, of the big bruiser who in reality is very awkward about his own speech impediment. And Victor, Sonny Gascon, would stutter occasionally, and he was very self-conscious about it. But anyway, he went on to formulate the system Kara Zempo Goshin Jitsu. He had a falling out with Cedro Emperado and started his own form of Kempo. And he, in turn, again, taught the Air Force recruit and member of the Air Force who was stationed out in Burbank, George Passari, who then brought the art back to New England. So I started studying with USSD in the early 1970s, and I got all the way up to my blue belt. And my instructor decided to leave the school for various reasons. And other individuals would take over the school, but it just wasn't the same as training with him. After that point, I started going on to go train with whoever I could. So I trained in Taekwondo and Tung Sudo with German Joe Gonzalez. I trained in Aikiken and Aikijo, which were the weapon legacies of Aikido, with Sensei Jack Leonardo, who brought Aikido to New Bedford. I then got involved at SMU, Southeastern Massachusetts University in North Dartmouth, with Sifu Edward Jada, or Shifu Edward Jada, who was the 8th chosen disciple of Sifu Jason Zhou, who many people are familiar with out on the West Coast and in the Wu-Tang curriculum. And yes, that's right, I'm a real member of the real Wu-Tang clan. And studied Northern Praying Mantis Kung Fu, also Tai Chi, also select forms from Bagua, Ying Fu Bagua, and the Grand Master of the system, Liu Yingxiao. Grandmaster Liu was one of the 10 Tigers of Taiwan and taught the presidential bodyguards for Sun Yat-sen and Chiang Kai-shek. Had a long, illustrious legacy through the Wu-Tang lineage. So I'm studying all these different arts. I also met up when I went to European Health Spa and met a gentleman, John Gabriel, who used to work on the radar systems of the B-52 bombers, who had studied Taekwondo in a system called Taichuandao, which is the Taiwanese pronunciation of Taekwondo, which combined Taekwondo and several Kung Fu systems. So I'm studying with all these different individuals simultaneously. Okay. I'm spending 5 to 6 days a week training with all these different instructors, learning as much as I possibly can. In my early days with USSD, I found that I didn't realize it, but I had a photographic memory. So I would buy martial arts magazines, and I wouldn't just buy them. I'd memorize them. Mm-hmm. I'd memorize the different stories and different masters and whatnot, and was fascinated with the martial arts. Did not have any success with team sports, although had my share of playing a street hockey goalie in my younger years, because I was originally born pigeon-toed, and because of it, I was grossly overweight, couldn't run with the other kids, etc. Had the classic cast on my legs as a small child. But I got involved with martial arts, and horse stance straightened my feet out and strengthened my antagonist muscles in my legs, and I fixed my legs.
Wow! Okay.
So I was very excited about that, and I was enraptured with the martial arts. The classic phrase is, "There is no I in team." I go, "Yeah, but there's 3 in individual."
I want to back up just a little bit to that very first school. You mentioned, when your instructor left, it just wasn't the same. What was it about that first instructor? What was it that you think drew you to him? What was special about the way he taught?
Ed Hosmer. I can't speak enough highly about Ed Hosmer, but I'm sure we'll try. Mm-hmm. So Ed Hosmer had the blonde hair of Robert Redford, the physique of Bruce Lee, the flexibility of Jean-Claude Van Damme. He wasn't following procedure. What I mean by that is, at the time, USSD and subsequent incarnations were you only do what we do. You don't go to other schools. You don't train in other places. You only train with us. Well, he wasn't big on that. And he traveled down to go train with Jeff Smith, who at the time was, light heavyweight champion of the world. And he'd go work out with him, and he'd train up with Bill Superfoot Wallace. Then he'd come back and he'd teach us, and we'd still go over the curriculum that was taught through USSD, but we'd also be doing boxing rounds, and we'd be doing skipping jump rope, and we'd be doing other things that weren't in that curriculum. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why he eventually left. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, he was such an inspiration. I mean, that was everything you wanted to be. I mean, it was funny. He was such a good-looking guy. Girls from the Fairhaven High School would walk by and they'd look in the window to watch him work out bare-chested during the summer. It was hilarious. I'm like going, it was like he was just such a nice guy. And to this day, he's a wonderful person. He runs a transportation company down in Sedona and became very involved in Aikido for many years. Oh, wow. And just was just an incredible human being. And that's it was if I had a perfect choice of having my first martial arts official instructor, and that was Ed Hosmer.
Very cool. Okay, and you said you stayed there until you got to blue belt. Now, did you get into competition at that age, or did that come later?
No, Fred Valeria had tournaments, but I never won. If there was, there's a really funny story about that. So, if there are 3 places, I got 4th. If there are 4 places, I got 5th. I never placed it as a small child in tournaments. Okay. I only did a couple of them, and that was enough to kind of turn me off for a while. Mm-hmm. But then I started getting involved, like I said, in Kung Fu. I got involved in Taekwondo and Tang Soo Do, I started getting interested. And at that point, there was an ad in the local paper, and they were looking for students for Kung Fu. I was like, wow, that's interesting seeing this in the paper. So I answered the ad, and I met up with Chris Vieira and Leo Lessert, who were running a small kung fu classes in Leo's basement in a fairly rough part of town. I remember they were right down the street from the Sidewinders Motorcycle Club. And it was kind of the houses were kind of rough and run down, but I wanted to learn martial arts. Mm-hmm. And so I met with them, and they were doing this hybrid system of Kung Fu and adding in different elements from different martial arts and whatnot. And, I'm like going, okay, we're going to learn Nihonchi. Nihonchi's an Okinawan kata. That's not Kung Fu. What the heck are you talking about? I knew enough about martial arts from reading all the magazines and whatnot, but they were both good instructors at what they did. So I stayed with them for a while. And then while all this is going on and I'm training, like I said, 5 different martial arts simultaneously, I meet my old assistant instructor from USSD, Jim Gagnon. And he says he's teaching in his basement, in his home. And he's like, Joe, how come you never got the black belt? I said, well, Ed left and school went through like 4 different instructors and then closed. He said, well, would you be interested in learning computing? Oh, yeah, I'd love to get my black belt. You bet. So I started training with Jim. Okay. So Chris and Leo had parted ways, and Leo was just kind of in his studio practicing on his own and whatnot. So I touched base with him. I said, look, I want you to introduce you to a friend of mine. I'm working on Kenpo. And he had a kind of a low opinion of Kenpo, which was really funny because he had learned like 2 completely hybrid systems of Kung Fu that like had no lineage whatsoever. But anyway, so I introduced him to Jim, and they got along famously. They were both Vietnam veterans. They were both in Vietnam at the same time. They shared a love for martial arts. So Leo convinced Jim to move over to his studio in his basement, which was much better off, for lack of a better term. So we started teaching Kenpo there. So I was training with him, and there was another gentleman, Ron Valier, and in January of 1983, all 3 of us tested for our black belt together with Jim Gagnon.
Okay. Can you talk about that test a little bit?
Yeah, it was now, when I hear people talk about different tests that they've had, and they've done like, oh, I did an hour and a half test. I said, my test was 8 hours long.
Wow.
We went over all the forms, all the forms, all the techniques, all the weapons, everything. But then there were the head games. Now, in the old days in USSD, they were infamous for their hazing. They would do a testing, and they put you in a horse dance against the wall and kind of fake throw shurikens at you like they were really throwing them at you and doing all this. Really, I mean, Rebelo's law of martial arts testing. The amount of hazing is directly disproportionate to the amount of material actually given in a martial arts system. Meaning, if you're wasting your time doing stuff like that, I guess you really don't have a lot of stuff to teach somebody or test somebody in.
Okay.
When I tested with Ed Parker, there was none of that. It was like the material was more than enough.
Right.
But anyway, going back to that test, there were a couple of interesting things. Like, for instance, at one point we had the grapple, and all 3 of us would stand against the wall, and then one person would be called up. Now, we had one guy, Ron Valier. Now, Ron was 6'5", and my instructor was maybe 5'8". And so as we're standing, we have boom, And the moment you got dropped to the ground, you failed that portion of the test. So this is like not even 15 seconds, and Ron's already on the ground. So we're thinking, oh, this is going to be fun. So then Leo goes up, boom, 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 about 30 seconds, boom, to the ground. Now I'm thinking, okay, this is really going to be fun. Now, what I didn't know, I found out after the test, is he had set it up with Ron Valier that Ron would fall by himself after 10 seconds to put the doubt in our minds. Now, Leo had literally got thrown in within 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
But, I had studied a little Aikido and Sensei, and I'd worked with other people in grappling arts, and I was like, I knew how to check somebody off. You push on their shoulder, you push on the hip, they can't get the liver, they can't even go close to throw you unless they get you in a wrist lock or arm bar. So I come up and I'm going, no. Every time he goes here, hit my hip. No. You hit my shoulder. No. 2 minutes. Bip, time up. Never got to throw me.
Nice.
So another head game. Okay, so I have an egg. I want you to hit this egg with a martial arts technique without breaking it. Pulls out a small bottle of Tester's paint, gold. It says, put your tip of your finger on there. So I'll know you hit it by seeing the dot of gold from your strike. Okay. One guy comes up, tries to hit it with a spear hand, a full power spear hand, breaks it. Leo comes up, tries to do a whipping dragon tail whip, breaks it. He walks up, dips the thing. I look at him and go, okay, touch. He goes, you passed the test. So you didn't have to hit it hard. All I asked you to do was make a martial arts technique. I took a one-finger spear and I touched it like you would touch an eyeball. Nice. Touch somebody with an eyeball, guess what? They're going to close their eye. It's common sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that went on. I mean, besides all the physical, stuff that we had to do, mm-hmm. the calisthenics, and that's another big one on me. About testing. I'm like, this has always been my thing. I've learned advanced martial. I've learned 60 martial arts in my life, and I was just talking you off air when we talked about this gentleman who contacted me. You claim to have studied 60, black. I said I don't claim to have black belts in 60 martial arts. I claim to have studied 60 martial arts in my life. Now that could be the yellow belt or orange belt or midline rank. I mean, I don't have black belts in 60 martial arts.
Right.
I have them in 26, and that blows a lot of people's minds, just that.
Yeah. But
going back to that, after we got our black belts, I wanted to compete. And in late time 1979, when I was studying with Leo, I learned a kung fu form called Li Wan Kun from the Siloam system. In fact, Leo Fong wrote a book on it. And I went to compete at the AAU the AAU local tournament, which was held in New Bedford, Mass. And before that, like I said, if there was 3 places, I got 4th and 4th place. Well, I competed in this tournament in New Bedford, and I didn't place in forms, but I placed 2nd in sparring. And that was enough points to get me to the AAU Nationals. And that after I won that first trophy, that first award, I went to the AAU Nationals, didn't place, but then started getting involved in the open circuit, namely Crane, the Karate Referees Association of New England, mm-hmm. and the PKL, the Professional Karate League, which was run by Glenn Hart. And 1983, after Leo and I and Gerard got our black belts, Leo did something very important, and he had perfect timing in doing it, though he didn't know. He contacted Ed Parker because we didn't know that we weren't learning Ed Parker's Kempo. We didn't realize Ed Parker's Kempo system was completely different.
Right.
So Leo contacted Ed Parker. Now, at the time, Nick Serio, who had been in the IKK back in 1969 and then left, along with Doreen and Tony Cogliandro, Don Rodriguez, before he married Christine, they had contacted Ed Parker at the same time. So, we're training in the basement, after I'd got my black belt, working out with Leo on some material for our next degree. And his little old white-haired mother used to give us Kool-Aid after training, opens up the door upstairs from the basement and goes, Leo, Ed Parker's on the phone for you. And we look at each other like, you just told us Jesus Christ just called on the floor.
Wow.
So we rush up the stairs like something out of a Warner Brothers cartoon, leaving a smoke trail behind us. Nice. And Leo's talking to Ed Parker on the phone, and I'm listening, overhearing with every single word and hanging on everything that Ed Parker said. And we find out that he's coming to New England, and he's going to start teaching in New England. So we get right on it, and we find a tournament that he's going to attend, and we go to meet him. And this is we first joined the IKK in 1983 into 84.
Okay.
And got to work with Mr. Parker. He would come in and teach seminars. And I was hooked. Because the first seminar we ever took, I was in Joe go, Leo, it's Kung Fu. We do this stuff. this is a Chinese-based system of Kenpo. And it's obvious it's a Chinese-based system of Kenpo. So we were ecstatic. So we joined the IKK, the International Kenpo Karate Association, and got Big Red, the Kyoto Journal, and started going over the material. Now, I want to clarify a very important point, Brian, that at this time, everyone in New England was at the same point in Kenpo, meaning that because we had studied the George Psari, Nick Serio, Fred Villari lineage of Kenpo, this was all new to us. So all the people that were involved with the IKA, they were the same boat we were. They were learning at the same time. It wasn't a matter, well, they all knew all the material, all the black, and we didn't. No, we were all learning at the exact same time.
Okay.
So because of that, I wanted to learn more. And I got involved with the a local racquetball club, and I was teaching it, and I was switching over to Mr. Parker's system. And the owners of the place really enjoyed the classes, and they were like, how come you open a commercial karate school? And I said, never had the capital. I go, you do now. And they were backing me for a school.
Wow.
And I said, well, if we're going to do it, and I was working with Mr. Parker, and so I was following him around every time we would do a seminar. I'd follow him around like a groupie. I'd get him my little Dodge Dart, 1969 Dodge Dart, and I'd drive all over New England, take whatever seminars I could, learn whatever I could from him. And, he was like, if you have a question, don't be afraid to write it down or ask me. So I took him at his word, and I'd write things down about techniques and forms as I was learning it and going over the material. And I talked to my owners, and I wanted to open an Ed Parker franchise. So we had a meeting with Mr. Parker at a particular school, and the instructor at that school was so upset that we were, quote unquote, bypassing him, in his opinion. He wouldn't even let us in the school. We had to have the meeting out in the Cadillac of the owners. It was hilarious. But unfortunately, the deal didn't go through, and it fell. My backers didn't want to do that. But Mr. Parker never forgot how much I wanted to learn and how badly I wanted to learn, how much I was willing to do an Ed Parker franchise. So I would follow him around, and I would train with him wherever I could. Of course, I trained with the local instructors who were also learning the system at that time, and just kept working on Mr. Parker's system, and started to compete using Mr. Parker's forms and placing.
Nice.
And I ended up being the first person who was ever ranked in New England doing Ed Parker's forms. And mind you, I was competing a lot of times if there wasn't a separate Kenpo division, because Crane was experimenting with that, I'd enter soft style because of the Chinese influence. So here I am, I'm competing against Richie Brandon, who later on would become Yin Yang Man for WMAC Masters. Yep. I'd compete against Ho-Sung Park, who later would become Liu Kang from the first two video games of Mortal Kombat. Yep. These were the people I was competing against. And it was real interesting because one day we're at McDonald's and we're talking about where we're going to go next. And I thought, oh man, if only I had a camera that I could talk about their life and career. And that became the impetus for me wanting to do a TV show. And there was a local martial artist and musician, Mikey Antunes. Tunes was the saxophone player from John Cafferty and
the Beaver Brown Band. I've seen them in concert.
Yep.
Yeah, great.
Yep.
Great
so
band.
he was also featured in Andy and the Cruisers 1 and 2.
He played
so
Wendell.
Being of Cape Verdean heritage and also being a martial artist who trained with Dave Arundel, he had a TV show that he used to do, and he would put a small self-defense segment on it. So I asked him, I said, what made you start up the show and whatnot? So I went down to my local cable system, and they were like, oh, it cost you $500 an episode to get a sponsor, blah, 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 blah. Well, at the time, in Blackout Magazine, there was a guy, Ken Ferrer, who used to be the news anchor for KTLA in Los Angeles. And he was talking about a program he did called Martial Arts Today and how he did it on public access and whatnot. So I started looking up public access, and I contacted Tom back there. I said, tell me about public access. So I was talking to him about it, and he goes, I tell him the story. He's like, Joe, did they offer public access? I said, yeah, I mentioned it, but they said the cameras were broken and they really weren't going to work. I go, really? He says, hey, Joe, do me a favor, pull out your cable bill. Okay, take a look. Do you have something called an access fee or franchise fee? Yeah, right here, access fee. How much is it? $3. How many people would you say have cable? I'd say about half the city. How many people in New Bedford? Well, about 100,000 to 150,000. Why? He says, Joe, according to the federal government, that money, a portion of that money is supposed to go directly toward public access.
Yep.
Really? Wow. 75,000 times 3 every month. So I see the head of the city council at that time, George Rogers, and I tell him this wonderful story. And I finish up, I said, yeah, George, and if you look, the federal government's endorsed not just for public access, but for educational access and government access. where they record city council meetings. Hey, George, I wonder where all that money's going. Turn around, walk away. Next to the city council meeting is George Rogers going off about where's all that money going and where's supposed to be having all that. So eventually, the city got around to doing an entire public access channel as well as a government educational access channel, creating a multi-million-dollar studio in the city of New Bedford. But in the early days, I was just working off 2 VCRs and an Amiga video toaster.
Amiga,
and
nice.
The first interview I ever did, Jeff Speakman.
Nice.
Now, I never told Jeff he was the first one.
Yeah.
But I got him on the show, and that's how it all started. And you can watch that episode on YouTube. I put it on YouTube purposely. It's the first program on Martial Arts Today television, which has now been on the air, Brian, for 33 years.
Wow. So I got to tell you, literally 3 feet away from me is an Amiga 2000.
No! Oh my gosh!
I'm a diehard. I grew up on a Commodore 64. I got a Commodore 64 when I was 12. I got my first Amiga 500 in high school. Bought an Amiga 2000 in college. I still have a Commodore 64 and 3 Amigas.
Well, I got to give credit where credit is due. I can't take the credit for the Amiga. That goes to a friend of mine's, Mark Correa.
Yeah.
And I met Mark when he was 18 years old, and his brother and Mark and I used to play Dungeons and Dragons back in the late 1970s and or I should say mid 1970s, right? Yeah, mid 1970s. And so he was the one who had the Amiga video toaster. And there's a wonderful image of 2 dragons facing each other. Like I say, you go back to that episode, you'll see that image from the Amiga video toaster that opens the show.
I will be checking that out. That's awesome.
Yeah. So he was the one who helped me with that in the infancy of the program. And now we have a YouTube channel presently with over 180 videos. I do numerous videos on all the different martial arts that I've studied. I mean, I got to work with so many great people. I mean, people like Remy Priestis. I was working with Mr. Parker, and in 1985, I asked him, this is before the creation of the double club form, or what became Form 7, and this knife form becoming Form 8. I said, who would you recommend for stick work? When a moment's hesitation, he said, Remy Priestis. Immediately, Remy Priestis. That's who I would recommend. Well, at the time, there was a gentleman, Dave Hoffman, who was starting to bring in Remy to Massachusetts, up in Beverly. So I got to work with him at that point. And, when I first met him, took my first seminar with him, he was like, why are you here? And I said, Ed Parker. Oh, Ed Parker. Ed Parker is my friend. I demonstrated modern Anise at the internationals. I said, yes, sir. He recommended you. Oh, that's wonderful. So got to work with Remy Priestis and would follow him to different seminars. But I never took rank. I didn't go to the camps. I focused on the seminars. And my students, I would train everything that I learned from Remy. And, he put out a series of instructional videos at that time and taught the whole curriculum with that. So my student would go to the camps and they'd be like, you guys got everything to black belt. I mean, we test you for black belt. The highest rank we could promote you is high green. Who's teaching it? Joe Rebelo. Well, who's he learning from? Remy Priestis. Mr. Priestis. Mr. Priestis.
That's cool.
And it's real funny because years later, I had my television program. It was well on its way. Several years had been on the air. And so I go to a seminar that Professor Priestis was doing, and he was doing it with George Dillman. And it was supposed to be Wally J, but Wally had taken 6, so Leon J was there. But anyway, at the end of the seminar, I did an interview with Professor Priestis. Now, normally my interview is like 10, 15 minutes, but how often do you get Remy Priestis talking about a life and career? So it ended up being an almost hour-long interview, and then he did a demonstration at the end. Well, come to find out, this would be the last video interview that Remy Priestis would ever do.
Wow.
Shortly after that, he went to Germany and was diagnosed with a brain tumor and then passed away sometime after that.
Dang.
So, I had this footage and I kind of was sitting on it for a while. And I decided, it's been a few years, and Professor Priestis sadly passed away in 2001. I'm trying to remember, I believe 2001. And I was involved with Martial Talk. A friend of mine's Rob Hubbard started Martial Talk and different incarnations of it on the internet. So I put out that I had this interview, and immediately I get this gentleman from Europe who's with Modern Chinese, who shall remain nameless, contacts me. Oh, how dare you put this out? And you need the authorization of the Priestis family to even put this out and get the okay for this. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, this is news to me. So, but by the same token, I'm getting first-generation black belts contacting me, like Dan Anderson, Super Dan Anderson, and Kelly Warden. And they're like, hey, Tell me about this. Tell me about this interview you got with Remy. So, and I'm asking a whopping $25. Like nobody's going to break their spinal column on paying that for that.
Yeah.
So I send one to him and Kelly Wardencott. Well, you don't have the longest interview. I do. I go, video? Wait, it's video? Yeah. Well, what is it? 15, 20 minutes? It's an hour. An hour? You got Remy to sit for an hour and talk about, really? Can I buy the DVD? Of course you can.
Nice.
And now when they get them, they come, how'd you get him? What? How? This is amazing. How'd you know what to ask him? These stories are great. This is stuff I never heard from Remy. This is awesome, Joe. Man, you got to put this out. This is great. Dan Anderson, Joe, this is phenomenal. This is great. Joe, can I quote this in my next book? Well, come to find out, that simple interview I do to Remy Priestess has now been quoted in 7 Filipino martial arts books.
Wow. That's cool.
And that's the stuff that makes it all worthwhile. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Get to talk about and because I have the martial arts collection you mentioned at the beginning of the show, I had all this reference material. So when I interviewed someone, it wasn't like, okay, well, what's this karate stuff? No, it was like, look, in 1983, when you did this article in Black Belt Magazine, you stated this. Or when you did this seminar and at this point, or when you worked with these particular students, what motivated you? And it was like, I always knew I did my job when I get the following statement from my guest. How do you know that? Why do you know that? So in my course of doing all this, at one point I meet up with Alan Goldberg, and Alan Goldberg runs the Action Martial Arts magazine.
Yep.
So he's at the Ocean State Grand Nationals. So I said, can I do a short interview with you? So we start talking, and I mentioned about his early career studying originally Five-Handle style Kung Fu and then Wing Chun with Jason Lau, and how they basically formed the first version of the Guardian Angels before the Guardian Angels, where they used to wear black berets and patrol the subway to stop people from being assaulted and attacked. And I mentioned to him how he was featured one time on the Montel Williams show on WPIX, where he actually questioned the credentials of an instructor going over women's self-defense and questioned his credentials as a women's self-defense instructor. And he's like, you saw that? It's like, yeah, my cable system, Colony Cable, carries WPIX. And you saw that. And you remember that. And years later, he would joke around, yeah, he was saying so much stuff about me, I thought I'd have to kill him.
Nice.
So he gets involved with podcasting and starts up with the Action Martial Arts Power Hour. So I get on like one of the introductory shows as a guest, and I'm trying to remember who it was with. It was with Martin Cove. That's right, Martin Cove.
Yep.
So I was asking him about his work on a movie he did called Steel Justice, where he learned the double wakazashis from a gentleman, Michael Pacina, who many years later, in the last couple of years, I've been working with and studying with Okinawa Te, the legacy of Gordon de Pistola, his particular system, which he calls Te Kenpo Jiu-Jitsu. Been working with him, but I asked about that question, and Martin talked for like 15 minutes about it. So Alan Goldberg texts me via IM. He goes, want a job? And I became one of the co-hosts of Action Martial Arts Power Hour.
Nice.
And at least half a dozen occasions, the guest for that particular show would call Alan after the show and go, who is this KENPOJOE guy, and how does he know all this stuff about me? My favorite example is Tayari Cassell doing that, because I was mentioning all this stuff, and he was so shocked I knew all this stuff about him and knew about the highlights of his career and all these different things. And he calls Alan, he's like, who is this guy? And when we finally got to meet, it was like, this is amazing that you remember all this. Thank you so much. And they're so grateful because I get to talk about their life and career and the highlights of their career. Brian, I had a recent incident, not an incident. It was a wonderful experience where when I started getting involved with the martial arts mega weekend, the Action Martial Arts mega weekend about 9 years ago. And eventually became the master of ceremonies for their mega weekends trade show. And with 100 vendors, this year we had 9 martial arts tournaments, everything including women's collegiate wrestling, freestyle wrestling to arm wrestling. And a Kyokushin tournament, open point tournament. I mean, it's just amazing. Over 50 seminars, including free seminars. You only paid for the trade show, and all the seminars are free. And we're talking Cynthia Rothrock, Donna Dragon Wilson, in the past, Michael Jai White, Bill Superfoot Wallace. It was a who's who of martial artists. And 3 martial artists every 45 minutes teaching their skills over 3 days. Amazing.
That's cool.
Well, Mike DePasquale used to run and oversee the Martial Arts Hall of Honors, which was their version of a Hall of Fame. This year, we only had 47 countries represented. Last year, we had 57 countries represented worldwide.
Jeez.
And the podium is like a who's who in martial arts. It's Cynthia Rothrock. It's Don the Dragon Wilson. It's Shoni Carter. It's Chuck Zito. It's Tayani Cassell. It's Michael Jai White. I mean, it's Stephen Hayes. It's Vic Moore was there as a special guest this year. I mean, it's a martial arts who's who. And Mike DePasquale used to be the announcer. Unfortunately, he had a recent medical incident happen. And so when Alan Goldberg was talking, we started Alan Goldberg, he says, "Have Joe do it." So I've taken over it. And it's amazing. But I give a little speech about each person before they come up on stage. So Linda Dentley was there last year. So I start talking. I said, and I go over like about a 3-minute speech about their life and career and whatnot. And after the event, Linda comes up to me and grabs me by the arm and she says, "That was the most wonderful dissertation about my life and career I have ever heard. I should hire you as my agent. That was amazing. I can't believe all the things that you remember about my life and career." And that's what makes it all worthwhile. That's how I know I did my job. And that really is what makes me a martial arts historian. Alan Goldberg says he's not Kenpo Joe. He's Wikipedia Joe. You want to know something about martial arts? You go ask Joe. And that's what makes it all worthwhile. And that's, I continuously learning martial arts. Always. I'm still learning to this day. I'm always learning new martial arts. I'm focusing right now, like I said, I'm working on Gordon De Vasilla's system. I'm working on trying to get different people so I can start learning Lima Lama. When you looked at my resume that I sent you, I mean, you'll see I just last year, got my 2nd degree black belt in modern Chinese.
Okay.
I had tested for decades. And just, everybody was like, "Joe, you got the system. How come you never tested?" And I just said, I was informed, and I won't mention the individuals that I was at an event, whatnot, and they were like, "There are no ranks in Filipino martial arts." So I never tested for rank. So when I finally got around to it, acquaintance of mine, Tim Hartman, who I've known for years, his assistants and also high-ranking modernist practitioner Ty, he had contacted him and said, "Let's test Joe." And they contacted me about it. It was like, "Yeah, sure. I have all the material." And I made sure in front of the board, there were several board members that were from New England who knew me back then. So I'm going above and beyond the call of duty. If we're doing the Sinawali training drills, I drop the one knee, I drop the both knees, I come back up, and they're pointing at me. "Gee, look what I was doing," because I wanted them to have absolutely no doubt in their mind that I knew my material.
That's cool.
And that's the way my life's been, always learning, always growing. And in my later years now, they talk about ego, no egos and whatnot. And I say, no, the positive side of ego, where ego is, et cetera. Ego isn't an acronym. Ego stands for everyone's golden opportunity.
Nice.
And that's the key. If you had no ego, you'd never test for rank, ever.
Right.
You'd see no need for it. You'd never progress because there's no need. You learn that's it. In the old days in Kung Fu, there were no sashes and belts. It was based on time. That's what Kung Fu translates to: time, hard work, and acquired skill. Those are the little translations for Kung Fu, depending on the characters. So, for me, it was like I was just learning.
Very cool.
I just checked up to the ranks. But after a while, I did test, and after a while, they were like, I'd get elevated to much higher ranks. Why? I never tested, but I had all the material, and everybody knew I knew the material. I never thought I'd be a 10th degree black belt, let alone in 4 martial arts systems. It's insane.
Yeah.
And I see people on the internet going crazy about it. Going, "There's no way you got to live 400 years, or you got to be me." You got to have a 162 IQ, a photographic and recently informed, a photo eidentic memory, and you got to not have a life.
I got to ask you, looking at your resume, the black belt in Taekwondo, which style of Taekwondo? Because that's my core system, so I was curious about what other systems of Taekwondo people
You
are
bet. I trained with John Gabriel, who studied Taekwondo with the World Taekwondo Association, the old one, way back when, with Master Cheng Lu, who was at one point was General Choi's representative for Taekwondo for Taiwan.
Okay.
And what I was informed is that he and Che studied together under Don Il, who was the Korean calligrapher who originally taught both of them Taekyon. Now, Lu's family, Lu was mainland China's ambassador to Korea. And when together they fought later on with Mao against the Japanese in World War II, but then Mao started communist, so Sun Yat-sen and the Mandarins, who didn't want to lose their homes and their money, were like, we're out of here. We're immigrating to Formosa. Let's go. So his father immigrated to Formosa, and he studied different kung fu systems because they were rich Mandarins. And when Che said to him, "Contact, look, I got this thing tight. You were there for some of the occupation. You know, when we had to study Japanese, and I've incorporated that with Taekwondo and formulated Taekwondo. Would you teach my art to the military?" And I guess he liked it because it was simple. It was something you could easily teach military forces. So that's how it came in. Like I said, John worked on the B-52 bomber radar systems. So they taught it in military bases. So we learned Taekwondo. Nice. And then Cheng Lu afterwards started incorporating more of his Kung Fu, and he would use the term Taekwondo, which was the Taiwanese pronunciation of Taekwondo. But with him, it was more than that. So he incorporated these different Kung Fu systems, and he made 8 master sets that were taught. Now, John had many famous students. They were AAU champions. They were open point tournament champions. One of his most famous students was David Collins, who was a member originally of the Spider-Man team, which later became the John Paul Mitchell team. So he was part of the original team, John Paul Mitchell, and would compete all over the country and all over the world representing Taekwondo. So you had to learn Taekwondo, you had to learn the 9 forms of Taekwondo before you could learn Taekwondo. Nice. So it was mainly the Chung Do Kwan system with Chongji, Dangun, Kyoho, that lineage of forms.
Okay.
And also, we also learned the Palgu forms as well.
Yep, that's what our school still does, the Palgu forms. So that's what I've been doing since '92. The system we're in has the Taeguk, but I know my instructor is not a fan of them, so we don't really do those.
Well, you know what? The whole thing about the Taeguk, so this is the martial arts historian me. The Taeguk forms really embrace more of the Korean orientation. Remember,
right? All
the earlier forms, even though they were like, whether you went from Juri's lineage with Chongji on up, with Chung Do Kwan, or you went through like when Kim Soo put out the Palgu books through horror publications, which by the way are being republished as we speak.
Really?
Don Warner from Don Warner's publications has gotten the authorization from Century, who bought Black Belt magazine, and O'Hara Publications. They have given the rights to Don to republish the entire O'Hara book library.
Wow.
So all those books are coming back out. Matter of fact, he just offered Remy Priestess's book over at the Action event, as well as several other texts that have already been published. So Warner Publications, Don Warner Publications, will be republishing all the O'Hara publication books.
That's awesome.
Yeah, incredible. And I interviewed Don.
I tried to get Don on my show. He's unfortunately one of the few that actually wasn't interested.
Yeah, he's busy and a one-legged man. Believe me, it
Exactly.
took me a lot. It took me a lot to get. I got an interview with him at Dragon Fest.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, Don, we got to interview you. And we started talking, mentioned a couple of facts about his career. And he was like, okay. So we sat down, and it's got a great interview. It's going to be airing. Matter of fact, I believe it's airing this month on my cable systems.
Oh, cool.
But it'll be on YouTube within the next 60 days because the 2 people I'm interviewing, and if you're a martial artist and martial arts historian, you know these men, Don Warner and Emil Farkas.
Nice.
So we're going to talk about.
I put requests to both of them to get them. I haven't heard back from Mr. Farkas yet.
I'll put in a good word for you.
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's what I do, man. I'm a networking kind of guy. You know what I mean? That's
so I have to ask, since you I mean, obviously you know so much about martial arts and history and everything, and all these styles. I'm curious if you so our grandmaster in the system of Taekwondo I study is Grandmaster Mu Young Yun, 10th degree black belt. Ever run across that name? He started in Chicago, then moved to Fargo, North Dakota, and kind of launched his career in the early 70s in Fargo, North Dakota. And that's where
this is not the man. This is not the man who's the great master of Mumudo and Mumu Kwan, correct? Or is he?
He would have been under is either Sung Mu Kwan or Chung Mu Kwan. I'm trying to remember what.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the orientations. Chung Mu Kwan is one of the orientations that I had learned from John Gabriel.
Yep.
Like I said, it's really interesting because back then, what is Kwan? Kwan is training hall. In Chinese, in Cantonese, it's Kwun. In Mandarin, it's Kwan.
Yep.
And Chung Mu, Mu, I would say it's Wu Boo Boo, baby. People go, what do you mean? I go, Wushu, Bujutsu, Musul. Those are the terms from Chinese, Japanese, and Korean for martial arts. So Mu is martial. Chung is center. Like China is Chengguo, the Middle Kingdom. You look at the character for middle, you take a piece of paper, and you stick a brush through the middle of it. It looks like a sail on a sailboat when you look at the character. That's middle or center, because the Chinese believe themselves to be the center of the civilized world. So Chong Mu Quan is the center of martial training hall, meaning the center of the martial arts. And I tell people, Musul, like Yusul is jujitsu. Musul is martial arts. I do Kenpo. Korean version of Kenpo is Kwanbop. Taekwondo. Kwan is fist. Bop is law. Kwanbop. So when, you look at the orientation of that, but not right off the top of my head. But then again, Korean martial arts a lot my long suit.
Right.
Meaning of all people say, of all the martial arts, what's the one you know the least about historically as far as individuals? And I would say Korean.
Okay.
And, nothing against that,
right.
But the beauty of this now, I would go back. So I'd go back through his lineage and I'd look through all the Taekwondo times I have and all the traditional Taekwondo times and all the different, and I'd contact different people and look at different stories, like when I mentioned about Kwanbop, Korea's a lost legacy. And I mentioned about this one particular style, their founder learning Kwanbop and teaching it, one of the high-ranked people from this organization. Oh, no, that's not true. Blah, blah, blah. I'm going, I've got interviews with your own master admitting to it. I said, don't you do these techniques? And I pointed to a video I did, which, again, here's one for you to check out. Kwanbop, Korea's Kenpo Legacy, on my YouTube channel. Watch it. And look at your Hoshin Sul, which in Japanese would be Goshin Jitsu, your self-defense techniques. Now, in the art of Tang Soo Do, they have 90 of them. And I state that it's 3-3-3, meaning 30% is Okinawan or Japanese-based karate, 30% is Taekyon, and 30% is Kwanbop, which is Korean Kenpo.
Okay.
And I show specific examples so that you can go look back through your martial arts techniques and go, oh my gosh, that's a Kenpo technique. Oh my gosh, that's a Kenpo technique. As a matter of fact, Brian, I was just featured in the spring 2023 issue of Masters Magazine. And if you remember, when Masters Magazine was put out on the newsstands like at Barnes & Noble, it was the only magazine that was sealed in plastic because it also included a DVD.
Yeah, I remember that.
Now, that's put out by Val Majalovic, who was originally from Serbia, and he came to America and studied traditional karate. And he used to be the person who used to do the video distribution for a lot of the major studios out in California.
Okay.
So he would do the video distributions for Disney and for Columbia. They'd bring in their master copies on film, and then he would transfer it to VHS, and then later DVD. So he's a lifelong martial artist. So he decided, and he was also involved in publishing at some point. So he decided to create Masters Magazine. Well, now you can get Masters Mag, the hard copy of it, through Amazon. It's like $20, and you get a DVD with highlights of some different articles. It's two DVDs in one. So you get a PDF of the magazine, and then you get another one, which is a DVD showing video segments, because he also got involved. He was in video production for decades.
Okay.
So he does all the video production. I was down there for Dragon Fest. I did an interview with him. He was very impressed. Matter of fact, if all goes well, I'll be on the front cover later on this year.
Nice.
We just did a big 4-page article in the spring issue called What Makes It Kenpo.
Okay.
And we also did a video segment on it as well. We'll be doing another one in the future for the magazine.
Nice.
But that's what goes on. This is my job. Welcome to my job. This is my life.
Well, I have I have a little bit of homework for you then after we're done. The January 1985 issue of Taekwondo Times.
Definitely check out. Yeah, send your subordinate's name. And so does he run his own organization, or what organization?
Well, he's retired now. So my actual instructor, 8th degree Grandmaster Jim Grimstead, his instructor was Grandmaster Mu Young Yun. He's retired, but he was on the cover of Taekwondo Times January 1985. They had a feature story on him. So
no problem. So I have that issue. I have a complete collection.
I have it somewhere. I think I still have it. I know I had 2 copies, and at least one copy got destroyed when our house got flooded. So I'm hoping I still have the other copy somewhere.
Let me see if I've got it. And let me see if I can find you another copy.
Yeah. I'd appreciate it.
I have that. I have stuff like that happen all the time.
Nice,
yeah, there's a real funny story about that magazine. So many years ago, I was approached by Bob Leakey. Now, Bob Leakey, many people will know through his column in Karate International magazine, which was Mike Pasquale's publication. They also will know him through the series of videos he did for Pants Productions on the art of Aikido.
Okay.
So he contacted me about doing a comparative study project where he was going to have John Wooten, who was at one point the world's strongest man. He was a judo jiu-jitsu player as well. He had done a movie called The Black Belt Priest. That was really interesting. And it was going to be him they were going to do jiu-jitsu, judo, and he had aikido. So Bob was going to do the aikido. John was going to do the jiu-jitsu, and they had an elderly gentleman who was a well-known judo coach that was going to do the judo. So he's visiting my school to discuss the project. He goes, yeah, I worked for American Karate Magazine. Yeah, it was 9 issues, 14. No, Joe, there was 9, 14. Joe, hold on. Boom, here's a complete run. So I never got paid for that article. Bob, that's why you think there's 9. And I do stuff like that. And this is my job. Welcome to my job.
Hey, it's a fun job.
Oh, it's a great job. I do what I love. I love what I do, and I get to do it for a living. How many people can say that?
Not many, unfortunately. So I wish I could. So if I could turn this into my career, I'd do it in a heartbit.
There you go, right?
So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so, and it's a funny thing. I never thought in a million years a little chubby 12-year-old Joe Rebelo at United Studios as an orange belt would ever become a grandmaster in the martial arts.
Yeah.
And someone asked me the other day, they were like, well, what's it take to be a grandmaster? I looked at him and said, your instructors die. And that wasn't the response he expected, but it's sad but true.
Yeah.
I've had men laying on their deathbed, hours away from the end of their own life, in tears, looking at me going, Joe, if only I had let you record more. If only I had instructors. No, you can't film this seminar. No, you can't film this.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at me dying, going, where's my legacy going to be after I die? I want you to take over the system in one case. And I sat there and said, well, what about this other student? He's been with you longer. He won't do anything with it. You will. And I start to choke up because I'm going to get out of my chair. I'm at my studio right now. And I'm going to turn around and I'm going to look at this line of photos that hangs above my place of honor. And one of my instructors one time was visiting. He goes, take me off the wall. Gentleman Carlos Fabres, who ran the Nindo-Ryu system of martial arts, 9 shadows of Nindo-Ryu, 9 styles of martial arts under it, over 45 schools worldwide at one point. He says, take me off the wall. I said, why do you want me to take you off the wall? It's a wall of dead men. I go, Sensei, not everybody on that wall is dead. I pointed, but 2 years ago, he died.
Oh, wow.
And I look at the wall of dead men. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, at least 10 of them are dead. So many memories, so many experiences, and wanting to learn and train and study and grow as a martial artist.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought I'd get to 10th degree black belt. I never thought, the heck, that's it's a funny story. I was at a seminar with Tadashi Yamashita, and in Nindo-Ryu, at the particular rank I had, they were talking about, I was 6th or 7th degree black belt in Okinawan weaponry. Mm-hmm. Through the Nindo-Ryu organization, still studying, learning. And I was wearing a red and white panel belt. So Yamashita walks up to Mike Burton, who was brought him in for the seminar. He goes, cool. Who the guy with checker belt? Say, checker belt for little old man sitting chair at test. And it was funny. And I was like, explained who I was and who I'd studied with. And years later, I would see him in a seminar it was a Nick Serial Memorial event. And my instructor had told me a story about Yamashita being in Puerto Rico when he was doing his famous double Kamazan rope, and he was up on a wooden stage, and the blades were sharp, and he felt one of the blades stick in the wooden floor. So he yanked to pull it out of the floor. It wasn't the floor. It was the callous section of his heel that was so calloused over, he didn't feel it. Dang. And he pulled up, and he cut himself from his heel all the way up to almost the end of his calf muscle, almost into his inner thigh.
Dang.
So, well, man, that's a story and a half. So I see Yamashita Sensei. And I was fascinated with an art he does called Sui Kendo, which basically is his version of Kenpo. Mm-hmm. And actually, he had worked on Lima Lama with Tino Tiliosega and another gentleman, Joe Covington, and formed the Complex, which is a series of 65 techniques, I believe, that comprise Sui Kendo in his system. And it's so different from the Kobayashi Shorin-Ryu he does. Mm-hmm. That's the flow of Yamashita. So I sit there and say, Yamashita Sensei, to ask you a story. So he looks at me. What? A friend of mine was in Puerto Rico, and you did a demonstration on stage with your comment. He just puts his hands up, and he reaches in, he takes his, I believe it was his left leg, and he pulls it up, and I see this long scar going up his leg.
Wow.
So anybody who knows Tadashi Yamashita, ask him to show me that scar. But yeah, so those are the kind of stories that you get that are above and beyond what most people know.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of stories that you find out certain things about people and they look at you and go, how do you know that? And I know he's looking at me going, why do you know that?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, my instructor was there. He was there when it happened. I said, you used to, right? You used to teach Bill Solano. And he nods his head. Yeah. William Solano, who's still very much alive in Puerto Rico. He trained with Fusei Kisei. He trained with Kimo Wall in Matsubayashi. Oh gosh, the Kobujutsu tradition, Matayoshi Shinpo, Kobudo tradition. So he worked with all these different instructors. So whenever they came, they'd be bringing them to Puerto Rico. Whenever in Puerto Rico, he'd work with them. So, these are stories of people that I worked with and studied with and trained with. And, David German, I can actually say I trained with the men who gave Ed Parker, I can say that I trained with the men who gave Elvis Presley and Wayne Newton their black belts, who were Ed Parker and David German, respectively.
Nice.
And I got to work with David German in Thai. And, I became his official historian for his system. And he states that in interviews you'll see on YouTube.
That's cool.
Just very blessed, very thankful, very grateful. Everyone talks about that now, right? Gratitude, the law of attraction,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm incredibly grateful. How blessed was I?
That's why I'm really curious to hear your answer to this question. Just with everyone you've met, everyone you've trained with, the life you've had, who would you put on your martial arts Mount Rushmore?
One, Ed Parker.
Nice.
No doubt about it. Ed Parker. In relation to my personal training or martial arts in general.
And that's up to you. It's your personal Mount Rushmore. So if I've had people put, Bruce Lee and Ed Parker. I've had people just put their own instructors. So it's completely up to you. It's your Mount Rushmore.
If it was my personal journey, it'd be, of course, Ed Parker, Ed Hosmer, Carlos Febres, David German.
Nice.
And you know what? And if it was a Kempo one,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be Ed Parker. It'd be David German. It'd be Frank Trejo. It'd be, I pick unique people. Sonny Gascon from Kata Zempo, the founder of Kata Zempo Goshin Jutsu.
Okay.
There's so many different people who influenced me in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I've made Kempo my life. I've studied numerous other systems. I literally have black belt instructor certification in Chinese, Okinawan, Japanese, Korean, Filipino, and American martial arts.
Wow.
And, can the average person, say that? Of course not, because the average person will never become a black belt, right?
Right.
You hear that line, how long does it take the average person to become a black belt? That person doesn't become a black belt. I have what I call the Hall of the Brown Belts. These are people, they got all the way to that brown belt, never got to black. Mm-hmm. And it's sad. You watch people, they get all the way, and and you wonder, what is it? Did they think they have to legally register their hands? I love when that shows up every third blue moon on an equinox. Oh my gosh.
I was almost one of those guys. And Taekwondo, red is right before black, brown then red.
Oh, right.
And I got to my red belt and actually tested for my black belt and I didn't pass. And I had moved back to California. And when I came back home, just life got married, started having kids. Fast forward, it was 10 years when I finally went back and finally got my black belt. I never gave up, but I knew I was going to do it.
But you did it.
No matter how long it took. Exactly.
Yeah, but you did it. I look at certain people that I know. Now, I have some students who got their black belts in certain arts, but not in others. Mm-hmm. Which I always wish they had gotten their black belt in those other arts, but they are a black belt. Yeah. Like I had one, student in a couple of arts and was studying other ones. And, and that's the funny thing, in a world where we're full of martial arts cults and closed-minded blinder mindsets, mm-hmm. I worked with Ed Parker. Mine's like a parachute, works best when it's open. Mm-hmm. My Aikido instructor, Jack Leonardo, it is good to have an open mind, but it's better to have an open heart. I was taught by those individuals, some of the deadliest men I ever met were some of the nicest people. Mm-hmm. And they were the people that encouraged me to go study other martial arts. They were the person that was secure in themselves, that they weren't paranoid that you were going to leave them if you went to go train another martial art. And, if you do something good and you're a good martial arts instructor, guess what? Your students will never leave you. Right. Or at least they'll stay with you for years and years and years. And I could never fault any of my students for going to train another martial arts. How could I fault someone for doing what I did? Exactly. And then by learning another source, you suddenly see things that completely explain something you do in your system of martial art that maybe were never explained to you. Mm-hmm. And so you get what Ed Park used to call slanted forehead syndrome, from slapping yourself and going head. Like, I knew that, or I never knew that. And suddenly that's why we do that in that form. That's why we do that. I never thought about it. But then again, I had never studied this art before. One system's super secret deadly technique is another system's yellow belt material.
That is true.
I tell people, I didn't know that. And he said, you need to get out more. You need to get out there more, man.
Yep.
You need to learn and grow and evolve. And I do classical martial arts. I do traditional martial arts. I do modern martial arts. I do eclectic martial arts. I do the multiple choice question answer is E, all of the above. Actually, that's D. E is none of the above. So we'll stick with all of the above. And that's how you learn, grow, and evolve.
There you go. So in over 50 years of martial arts, all the styles you've studied, is there one philosophy you've learned that just rises to the top? It's super important. It's part of your everyday life. You keep coming back to it.
There's a meme out there with Dan Inosanto. And Dan's over 80 now.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I'm honored and privileged. I've just been nominated for induction into the Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame, which will be this June in Las Vegas. And I'm honored and privileged to say from that selected group, I'm also going to be inducted with Chuck Sullivan from the Karate Connection.
Nice.
And Dan Inosanto.
Wow. That's cool.
And there's a meme of Dan Inosanto going, I'm always studying. I am always a student. I'm always learning. There's always something new to learn. And that's the truth. There's always something new to learn. They have a joke in Kenpo about, how the higher you get in rank, the bigger your gut gets. Well, thankfully, I'm a slim, trim, under 200 pounds, and I feel great. And I've been doing martial arts. This October makes 55 years in the martial arts.
That's cool.
And, it's great because, like I said, people, the internet, the haters will go, oh, you got to be, and I hear it, you got to be 400 years old to be able to do it. And just, like I said, I was joking around, you got to be me. But a friend of mine was at a martial arts event recently, and my name came up in conversation. Oh, yeah, that guy claims all the time. And someone else who was there at the table before my friend could speak up for me sat there and said, you're kidding me, right? Kenpo Joe? Man, you ask that guy a question on the internet, or he'll see a question, and he'll put out a full-blown video on it in detail, breaking down different elements. And I've been studying the system of Kenpo for until how many years. He goes, that guy teaches me stuff about my own system I've never known before, about my own art or a particular form or set. And then he'll cross-reference it with other martial arts as he's talking about it. You gotta be kidding me. If that guy's a phony, we should be also fake. It was like,
nice.
So my buddy calls back. I said, man, who was the guy who dogged me down? More importantly, who's the one who gave me the glowing testimonial if it wasn't you? He said, I don't know the guy, Joe. Because I said, oh, you've met Joe? He says, no, I've never met Kenpo Joe. I just watch his videos on YouTube, and they're amazing. And the stuff the guy goes over. And I said, well, why don't you ask him a question? And it was like, man, he says, you get kind of intimidated. And I'm like, God, man, that guy's one of the most accessible people in the world. Mm-hmm. I go to events and people walk up to me and go, just sit there and go, hey, I just want to tell you, I really enjoy your videos. I'm like, well, thank you. That means the world to me.
Nice.
It's how can I give back to the gene pool? In our society today, Brian, we have so many people. Oh, my sensei is YouTube. Oh, and I go, you don't think in ancient times, if the ancient masters had footage of their grand masters going over the forms of their system, so that way there'd be no doubt in their mind how the katas were originally performed? They'd eat that up like ice cream. Are you kidding me?
Exactly.
Now we have that capability, and people, you can't learn from a video. I'll tell you, I've seen forms that I've picked up from video over the years, but it's also because I already had knowledge in that particular system of martial arts,
right,
or I studied something similar to it. So Ed Parker had a great story. He and Chuck Sullivan did a video, a film, 8mm film, back in 1961, the year I was born, by the way. And they put out these films. And two guys from New York who were black belts in karate bought the films. And they contacted Mr. Parker by letter, and they paid for a plane ticket, and they flew to California. And they went over the material that they had learned from the 8mm films. And they only had to correct one thing on the two-man set. And the only reason they had to correct it is because he and Chuck Sullivan had actually made a mistake because of the size of the studio, and Chuck had done an adjustment step during the two-man form. But other than that, all the material they did was correct.
Wow, that's
now,
impressive.
Here were two guys. This is the 1960s.
Yeah.
Now, here's another interesting story. Do you know how Chuck Norris got a 7th degree black belt in Tang Soo Do?
I'm pretty sure I've heard the story, yeah.
He sent in a film.
Yep, that's right.
He sent in the film to Hwang Kee in Korea, doing all the material, no edits, just filming straight, would be what you could with 50 to 100 feet of film. Did all his required material for 7th degree black belt, sent it in. Chuck Sullivan was having a discussion. Can you believe it? He got it by film. Did he do the material he was supposed to? Well, that's not the point. Yeah, that is the point. Did he do the material? Obviously, he did his requirements, but he couldn't afford to fly to Korea. So he filmed himself doing all the requirements and sent it to Grandmaster Key, and they promoted him. Now, of course, they'll see him, and of course, they'll go over the material for his next rank and whatnot, eventually, and or he'll fly to Korea and whatnot. But the bottom line is, he knew the material. Now, that's commonplace, right?
Right.
And Chuck Sullivan himself with Karate Connection. You can get your, and people say, oh, well, it's not the same. And I go, to an extent, yes. But the bottom line is either you know the material or you don't know the material.
Right.
And I know that because guess what? A couple of years ago, gentleman Doug Gigliotti from Rhode Island brought Chuck Sullivan in. And one of my students wanted to get involved in it. They both took, and I said, you know what? They have a thing called Dinner with Chuck on YouTube, or actually on Facebook. So, one day I had a question. We could type in things up. So Joe Rebelo writes, in the IKCA regulations, you state if a person has gotten a degree of black belt for Ed Parker, that they can test and receive the subsequent degree in Karate Connection as long as they can perform the master form with the 55 techniques. Is that true? And is that still accessible and available? No, this is live on Facebook Live. He goes, wow, no one's ever asked. It's still in the regulations. It's still in the rules. Yes. So I'm like, okay, Chuck Sullivan's coming to Rhode Island. Why don't I learn the master form and demonstrate it in front of him? So we do the seminar. Here's Chuck. I go up with the black belts. And I'm even all the way up. I've got my little portable DVD player and I'm watching the form as we're driving up from the passenger seat. I was watching the form over and over. Because I've been practicing it for a couple of months. Mm-hmm. Yes, I said a couple of months. So, and I worked with Doug Gigliotti a couple of times. I'm like, okay. So we go up and we're going through the form, all 55 techniques. Chuck, what? That's the Parker name of the technique. You change that motion and you call it this. And you're right, Jeff. Keep going. Chuck, what? That's the Parker name for the technique. You made this and it's called this now. All right. Yeah, you're right, Joe. All right. Chuck, again? Yeah. Does it 3 times, it goes in. I correct them all 3 times. Then it was like, okay, so each one you're going to come up, do the master form. No problem. Me first. I want to go get out of the system. All 55 techniques. And then boom, finish it. Bang.
Nice.
So the whole seminar finished up. Chuck, do I know your system? Yeah, Joe. Just send in the video. Okay, So my students promised that they'll pay for me to test. Well, I didn't know it was $225. I don't know, but I wanted to test. Well, my students never paid, so I never tested. But do you know, for the next 3 months at dinner with Chuck, sooner or later, they'd all be talking about me, and it blew my mind, and it blew their minds because he's like, it's a pup. And Chuck's like, yeah, I can't. And you can watch it. I mean, you can go back through Facebook, look up Chuck's, and you can watch these episodes at that time. One of mine's popped up on Facebook memories. I'm like, oh, wow, shoot, that's right. You really want something, you move heaven and earth to get it, right? That's what Dale Carnegie says.
That's true.
How to win friends and influence people, right?
Yep.
If I can give any advice to your listeners, do what you love what you do it for a living.
There you go.
And don't take no for an answer, and do everything to the best of your ability.
Nice.
And remember, the best is always your best. Doesn't necessarily have to be someone else's.
Right.
I've been students in wheelchair. I've been students who are legally blind. I've been students. You do it because you love to do it. And that's the key.
Nice. All right, I have a few fun questions to wrap up the interview here. So this one I'm really curious about because of your collection. What is your favorite martial arts book?
Oh, wow.
I know.
There's not one. I mean, for Kenpo, it's Ed Parker's Infinite Insights into Kenpo. He literally documented his entire system.
Love those books. Yep. And
explained how he did it. I mean, where else are you going to get that?
What is one you'd recommend to someone getting involved in martial arts for the first time? What's one or two that would pop in that you'd say, hey, you have to read this book?
If you're into Japanese martial arts and their history, definitely get Secrets of the Samurai by Easterbrook and Ratty. Wonderful text. If you want to find out about the history of all martial arts, I recommend several books by Emil Farkas and John Cochran, Martial Arts History, Traditions, and People. If you're into Kenpo, like I said, Ed Parker's Infinite Insights. Mm-hmm. There's so many great books out there. I must have 500 to 750 books easy. Wow. Easy. No problem with that. But yeah, those are some of the ones I would recommend.
Okay.
There's a couple of fun ones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the fun ones are Angry White Pajamas, the story of a group of roommates living in Japan who decide to study Tomiki Aikido and
Mm-hmm.
decide to take the Tokyo Riot Police Force instructor course in Tomiki Aikido with Shioda.
Mm-hmm.
Another interesting one is Karate as a Way of Gentleness by C.W. McCall, who literally climbed Mount Everest. Another one is Zen Combat by Jay Gluck, which is a great insight of him interviewing different martial arts masters in Japan. Gosh, those are some of the fun ones.
Okay, some good answers. That's why I asked this question, because I love adding to my own library. I'm probably at about maybe 130 to 150 martial arts books, so nowhere near you. But since I've started the podcast, I've probably added about 30 books to my list easily. So
yeah, I get anything. If you want history, anything by Emil Farkas and John Cochran combined. They wrote some of the best overall martial arts history books in the world.
Nice.
The world.
Nice. All right. How about you mentioned video games, so how about a favorite martial arts video game?
Let's see. There has to be more than one. Sorry. For okay. The original Sega Saturn system, Last Bronx, the Soul Calibur series, which, by the way, if you get Soul Calibur 2, a friend of mine used to work for Namco. He put me in the game.
Nice.
You can make me. At that age, at that time, you put me in a black gi with the red character for Chuan or Ken for Kenpo with a pair of Kenpo gloves on, and it's me. He put me in the game.
That's awesome.
Give me a bunch of stats, and I'll never forget my student Raymond Ramus. He put together. He goes, "Oh my God, it's you!" And I went, "What? It's you! It's you!"
That's awesome.
And sure enough, it was me. He had put me in the game. I was like, "That's so cool!" Later, the Tekken series,
nice.
And Virtua Fighter, because a lot of people don't know this, but one of our Wu-Tang masters, Adam Scher, he did a videotape on Baji, the 8 Ultimate system,
mm-hmm.
which was one of the main styles that Grandmaster Liu was known for and taught the bodyguards of Sun Yat-sen and Chiang Kai-shek. It actually was taught to the Emperor's bodyguards, the 8 Ultimate system, which was designed to blow through armor. So anyway, he did an instructional video in Japan, and my buddy who worked for One Ed Video used it for mocap for Virtua Fighter, and then later on for Tekken. And it's used by at least 4 characters to each of the games.
Nice.
As a matter of fact, there's a YouTube video you'll see about the importance of Baji in video games. And it was due to my buddy who was a Wu-Tang student in Japan who used it for motion capture.
That's very cool. Some good games there. All right. Now this one, you can't pick martial arts today. Favorite martial arts TV show?
Well, obviously, most people would say David Carradine would Kung Fu, and then they'd roll their eyes.
Yep, exactly.
There's so many lesser-known ones.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna mention a couple. Russell Wong did a wonderful series called Vanishing Sun.
Love it. Yes,
that was a great one. He also did another one called Black Sash. There's other ones. Oh gosh. You can go all the way back to select episodes of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Honey West, which both featured Gordon DeVasola, the instructor, one of my instructors right now, Michael Pacina, who I've mentioned aforementioned,
mm-hmm.
working with Mountain Cove and Steel Justice. Trying to think. There's a couple others that I've always been fond of.
See, I like those one-offs that lasted like 1 or 2 seasons. Those are the ones I love going back and rewatching and stuff.
Right. Like I mentioned, Vanishing Sun, Black Sash.
Mm-hmm.
Some interesting pilots. They did a pilot for Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins,
yes.
which comes from the Destroyer series,
oh.
which in the original film, Joel Grey portrayed Cheung and Roddy McDowell, along with Jeffrey Meeks,
yep.
who later portrayed Raiden in mm-hmm. Mortal Kombat Conquest. Another good series right there, Mortal Kombat Conquest.
Yep.
Here's a quick story about Dana He. So I'm working again as the announcer at the Action Martial Arts event. So in through the door walks Dana He, who's not scheduled, who isn't planning on being there. She's walking around, just looking around. And I go, "Oh my God, it's Dana He." And she goes, "You know me?" "Right. How would I not know the gold medalist in demonstration sport of Taekwondo at the Barcelona, Spain Olympics? How would I not know the woman who doubled for Rene Russo in the Lethal Weapon series? How would I not know the woman who was not only a stunt character in Mortal Kombat Annihilation, but also was a speaking role character for Mortal Kombat Conquest? Oh yeah, I have no idea who you are." And she grabs me, pulls me close and goes, "I love you." And it goes, "You know how long I've wanted a woman like you to say that to me?" And she goes, "No, I didn't think anybody would know who I was." So the year before that, Cheryl Wheeler walks in the door. Similar thing, looking
mm-hmm.
around. I'm going, "Oh my gosh, Cheryl Wheeler." And it was like, you know who I am? Right. Like, I don't know the woman who used to compete in Yoshikai with Jerry Blank in Florida. No, I don't know the woman who was featured on covers versus Gracie Casillas in the match that never was to be. That should have been, because you were both top kickboxers of your day. No, I don't know you at all. And she, again, grabs me by the arm, exact same thing, says, I love you. And I'm like, man, I got a gift going on here, man. You know, hot martial arts women saying they're attracted to me and saying they love me. This is great. All right, you know.
That's cool.
But you know, Oliver Gruner showing up one year.
Yep, I've had him on the show.
And it's like, you know, Oliver Gruner. Oh, you know who I am? Right. Yeah, I have no idea what the movie Angel Town was. No, I never saw La Savate. No, I never saw The Circuit. Now, you never watched a series of Nemesis films. I have no clue in the world who you are. And I also, on your non-listed credit in Assassin X in Redbox, where they didn't list your name, but they list the old soap opera star as the star of the movie. And he's on what, 15 minutes, that whole stinking movie, and it's your film?
Yep.
I said, that's as bad as Rob Van Dam doing The Other Side of Town, and they put a big picture of Dave Bautista because he was WWE champion, and a little picture of Rodney Turner, even though it's Rob Van Dam's movie. Gotta love Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. So what
cool.
question were we on? I'm sorry.
That was the favorite martial arts TV show. But you gave quite a few answers. So
yeah.
And how about favorite martial arts movie?
Oh man, I have some weird ones.
Okay.
American Samurai. Nice. With David Bradley and Mark Dacascos.
Good movie, yes.
Because it was a really great weapon movie.
Mm-hmm.
I love weapons.
Yep.
I teach over 65 weapons. There are at least 1,000 weapons here in my studio.
Wow.
1,000. That's not a joke. That's the truth. 1,000, Brian.
That's cool.
And, you know, I always say if one person hits another, it's assault. Two people agree to hit each other, it's sport. Two people pick up something and hit each other with it, it's fun. So my favorite movies, Legendary Weapons of China is a great film. One of the first movies I ever saw as a child growing up was a movie with Chen Xing and Yasuaki Kurata called Kung Fu the Invisible Fist, which has the wildest Sai versus Tonfa fight scene I've ever seen.
Nice.
And, you know, you got to say The Perfect Weapon for Kenpo, of course.
Yeah, I love that movie.
You know, there's so many wonderful movies. I mean, you know, Brian, after this, I'll send you a couple pictures of my DVD collection.
Very cool.
And you're going to be like, oh my God, box upon box upon box upon box and pile upon pile upon pile. And it's like thousands of them.
Yeah, I own about 1,000 DVDs, only about 120 are martial arts ones. So.
Yeah, no, me, it's like, no, yeah, it's the opposite. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, obsessed. Yeah.
Final question. This one doesn't have to be a martial arts movie, but knowing you, it might be. Who knows? But just a favorite movie fight scene.
Chen Xing versus Yasuaki Kurata, Kung Fu the Invisible Fist. The Lau brothers fighting each other in Legendary Weapons of China. There's a great fight scene with Cynthia Rothrock, a couple of great fight scenes with Cynthia Rothrock and Richard Norton from The Magic Crystal. Nice. There's a great fight scene where they're using a collapsible 3-section spear against a guy with double tonfa, which is really wild. Tying him on the tonfa kika. Several of the fight scenes from Kids of Shaolin with Jet Li because it's 3-section staff versus 3-section staff. There's another one called Crazy Tiger, Dirty Toad with Sammo Hung with, again, 3-section staff versus 3-section staff, which actually blows my mind. I'm a big 3-section staff fan.
Nice. A lot of good answers.
Yeah, those are just, I mean, that's just off the top of my head.
A lot of knowledge about, you know, martial arts and in pop culture and stuff, which is amazing. I mean, I thought I knew a lot about martial arts movies and TV shows, but I think you might surpass my knowledge even. So.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, I mean, there's a couple of things coming up. Look for me soon in an episode of Viking Samurai.
Cool.
Again, that wonderful YouTube channel. Also, you know, watch my TV program, Martial Arts Today Television on YouTube. I'll
put a link for your YouTube channel in the show notes when the show comes out. For sure.
Yep. So. On there, I'm Kenpo Joe 1. Funny story. The guy who owned Kenpo Joe on YouTube, when he found out it was me, offered it to me. And like, nah, it's okay. You got it. You know, but you are Kenpo Joe. And it was like, you know, and you'll look up Kenpo Joe and there are other Kenpo Joe people who have that name.
Yeah.
But, you know, when people talk about Kenpo Joe, for lack of a better term, nothing and no aspersions upon them. It's me.
Yeah.
You know, whoever thought an AOL screen name would become my nom de plume. You know, here's the funny one about that. So I'm at the Ocean State Grand National Championships in Rhode Island, Warwick, Rhode Island. I'm in the men's bathroom of all places. So I come out of the bathroom. I'm wearing my IKK jacket. I'm washing my hands. Guy walks up to me and says, "Are you Kenpo Joe?" And that was the first time that anyone had ever referred to me by my screen name. I was like, matter of fact, I am. He goes, "I love your posting." Right now, the AOL used to have a whole series of message boards for martial arts.
Yep.
And he would say, "I read your posts. I copy your posts, by the way." I go, "Huh?" I print them up and I save them in a book. "Excuse me?" He goes, "Look, sir, other people write like a couple of sentences or maybe a paragraph. You write theses. You write doctorates on freaking topics. And you name sources. You cross-reference material. It is awesome reading your answers." And it's so sad now because AOL destroyed all those archives. They're all gone.
That's sad.
All gone. So it's so important to me now, all the more that I let people know about my experiences and talk about my instructors and talk about the different martial arts and show them in no uncertain terms that I really do know what I know.
Yeah.
And now, because of things like action martial arts, everybody else knows. I'll finish with one last story.
Okay.
I'm at the action martial arts event, and I'm the master of ceremony. So I'm there at the podium. There's myself, there's Alan Goldberg, and right next to me is Stephen Hayes.
Nice.
The man who brought the Bujinkan and Togakure Ninjutsu and the Takumatsuden legacy to America. So, and of course, I give a glowing testimonial about how this Tangsudo black belt in Atlanta read this book called Ninja the Invisible Assassins by Andrew Adams, and decides to travel to Japan and learn ninjutsu. So we're standing there next to each other. He goes, "Joe, I got to tell you, I'm really impressed how you get everybody's name right. And they're from, how do you do this? They're in all different languages." I go, "I speak 7 languages." "What?" "I speak 7 languages." He goes, "Besides all your martial arts accomplishment, you speak and yeah, I speak English, obviously. I speak Spanish because my mother's Puerto Rican. I speak Portuguese because my father's Portuguese. I speak French. Je suis parlez-vous français de l'école de Saint-Antoine. Écoutez, répétez, écrivez, I speak Italian, and I not a lot. I'm working on Italian. Italian's the one I'm working on.
Okay.
Also, Korean and Thai, but I also speak Japanese and I speak Mandarin.
Wow.
And he's like, "Besides all your martial arts, all your comedy," yeah. So that's amazing. Well, thank you. And again, one of the greatest things a person can hear is the sound of their own name. And when you talk to a person about their life and career, like we're doing now, Brian, and like you said, you're finding out things about me you never knew.
Right.
So it's a learning experience. I learned about your show and I wanted to be on your show. And you talk about people that you want to contact, you want to get on their show. Well, I happen to know those people. So now I can put in a good word for you. I can talk about this. I can say, "Hey, listen to my episode of this." And it's all about cross-referencing. It's all about networking. It's all about one simple phrase I learned. How can I be of help? How can I be of service?
Nice.
Ed Parker, make a smile and a handshake, your best friends.
That's cool.
Always offer your hand in friendship.
And that's one thing that's almost every one of my guests has recommended at least one other guest that I've had on. Some have done multiple and more and more and more and some not. But I mean, I started with 22 interviews, and from that, I think I had recommendations for about 15 more, and that just led to more. And suddenly I'm at over 100 episodes. I think you're going to be episode number 109. Your episode will be April 6th. Episode 109.
Bummer. I was hoping to be 108. That mystical Shaolin number, 108.
There you go.
Well, yeah, that's awesome. I'm so happy. I'm so happy to contribute. I'm so happy to be of service. I'm so happy to educate people about my life and career, educate people about the people who educated me.
I'm glad we were able to do this. And like I said, I will definitely put links, and I've watched many episodes of your show, and I definitely want to go back now and watch the Jeff Speakman one, because I've interviewed Jeff.
Yeah, that was the first one. Yeah.
Yep. And I got to train with Jeff for a short time when I lived in California, and just such a nice guy.
I followed your episode learning about you.
Nice. Yeah, it's cool. But I appreciate your time I so much, and I'm just enjoyed this so much, and I can't wait to get the episode out there for people to listen to.
Fantastic. And like I said, if you're listening to this podcast right now, and tell a friend, tell a neighbor, let fellow martial artists know, let the show grow. That's what it's all about. The more people we can affect, and the more people you can affect through your program, the better.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
And one more thing.
Yes.
Hey, show up at the Action Martial Arts Mega Weekend sometime.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.